Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Another big profile of AOC. This one, I believe, more illuminating than the cushy covers with Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, and her very, very gleefully draping alongside Mama Bear Pelosi. This from the New York Times, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on how she's changed. Okay. Congresswoman from New York says she's different from when she first took office, but she's not ready to call herself an insider. It's a long piece, won't read the whole thing, but it definitely sounds like an insider to me, to be honest with you. She says that she might make the progressive wing of her party, quote, suspicious, but she's comfortable having more influence on the inside. But what exactly is that influence? Inquiring minds would love to know. They ask her about, how she feels at 33, which is a pivotal point for a lot of young people, blah, 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 blah. Then also myself, I was waitressing up until, March, and I won my primary just a few short months later. And even coming into Washington, not just figuring out how I would orient myself politically, coming from a background of direct action and activism, but then also adding on the entire profession of legislating at a federal level. And then also the class dynamics, the gender dynamics that come from being a poor or working class person going into an environment of extraordinary privilege. There were years of learning ahead of me. Well, isn't that the thing? She talks about her background of direct action and activism in the past tense. Well, wasn't it framed, to be fair, not just AOC, but all of them, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, who I covered in St. Louis during Black Lives Matter protests after another black man was murdered by police there. And there were, 30 to 40 days of nonstop protests. Weren't we told that they were not going to leave their activism at the door and it really just become their background, but they were going to bring that to Congress? They were going to agitate, and agitation and activism was going to be the pipeline to their legislation, not abandoning that activism to try and prove themselves to old dinosaur corrupt legislators who are more busy doing legalized insider trading than any type of results for working class people. And in the beginning, it sure seemed that way. I mean, you remember, she was with the Sunrise Movement kiddies protesting outside Nancy Pelosi's office.
I just want to let you all know how proud I am of each and every single one of you for putting yourselves and your bodies and everything on the line to make sure that we save our planet.
Encouraging signs, but very quickly she became neutered. And it became a background in activism and direct action, not actually recurringly do that. Even during a pandemic, which would have been the preeminent, most sensible, most opportune time to agitate, to activate for Medicare for all. But they wouldn't even do that. Not all her fault, but, she definitely played a role. Why have things changed for you personally? Well, when I first came into office, I was unproven in a way that I think many other people may not be, right? There are a lot of people that are elected with a history of legislating, and I very much felt that I had to prove two things at the same time that were often at odds with one another. I had to prove to the people that elected me that I'm committed and very well grounded in all the values and issues and fights, from taking on a party establishment that can be very calcified to continuing to fight for landmark progressive issues like Medicare for all and comprehensive changes to our immigration system or criminal justice reform. And the second was that I had to prove to this world of Washington that I was serious and skilled, and that I wasn't just here to make a headline, but that I was here to engage in this process in a skilled and sophisticated way, that I did my homework, so to speak. Oof. Yeah, I think she proved something to her insiders in the corporate Democratic Party, that she was ready to unilaterally surrender and play ball. What she says, continue to fight for Medicare for all. And I want to be fair. AOC on her own cannot deliver us Medicare for all. I mean, that's just false. That's a false narrative. It's going to take way more than just AOC. Even if Bernie were president today, obviously there would be massive obstacles to Medicare for all through a Democratic Congress. Republicans now have the House. Bernie could use executive action if he were president to expand Medicare to everyone. Obviously, that would be watered down in courts from here to infinity and beyond. But it's going to take more than AOC. However, the fight for Medicare for all is going to involve activating the masses through direct action all over this country, through, frankly, economic protests, possibly even a general strike. You can't have that if you don't have leaders fighting. So when she says continuing to prove that I could both be a responsible legislator and also fight for Medicare for all, well, she's done neither. What is the fight for Medicare for all? I looked on Twitter. I think I've seen 2 or 3 tweets from her, even mentioning Medicare for all so far this year. And what exactly has she legislated? I'm not saying she hasn't delivered some money for her district, deliverables for her district. I mean, she is a congressman for her district, but for the broader progressive movement, what exactly has she legislated for the progressive movement? She went along with Biden abandoning a $15 minimum wage. I have not seen her say a word about Biden abandoning a public option. I have not seen fierce opposition or direct action or activism from her against Biden approving the Willow Project, Biden doubling drilling on public land with lands when he ran to end drilling on public lands. I mean, Biden has had every opportunity to declare a climate emergency, but when he gave a big climate speech recently, all he talked about was improving weather forecasting and more cooling centers for the vulnerable and elderly. What did Mrs. Green New Deal have to say about that? Crickets. So what is this fighting for Medicare for all and this pronounced legislating? And by the way, she's the one doing all these interviews. So I'm not looking for ways to get clickbait against AOC. I'm responding to big spreads in the New York Times, Vanity Fair, the New Yorker magazine, New York Magazine. I mean, she's had more profiles than legislative victories in recent years. So this isn't just low-hanging fruit. I'm responding to somebody who's claiming she is still a leader of the progressive movement, but not willing to actually do what she said she was going to do, which is fight and bring the ruckus to the Democratic Party. She was asked, you built your brand as this political outsider, but now you're the vice-ranking member on the powerful House Oversight Committee, the number 2 spot for Democrats on the committee. So clearly you have proved at some point that you do mean business. Do you see yourself as more of an insider? I don't think so. I mean, on a certain level, once you are engaged as a legislator, you are on the inside. That is a function of the role. And that grants myself or anyone else in a similar position the tools to be able to translate this outside energy into internal change. I'd love to know the change that she is bringing. And again, not just her, any of these squad members. What is the change she is bringing? I'm curious if you understood in 2018 when you were first elected that holding power and having relationships was going to be vital to how you moved the party. When I first came in, she answers, I came into an environment that I sensed was never going to give me a chance and into a party that was extremely hostile to my presence, extremely hostile to my existence. That's one of the reasons I dug so powerfully into my work. I think a lot of women and people of color, and especially women of color, have heard time and time again, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And I felt like I had to work way, way harder to not even get half as far, you know? I knew that relationships and expertise, of course, were important, but I also felt that the door was closed to me at that moment. And so the best thing that I could do is just work as hard as I possibly could to get to a point where I'd earn the benefits of the doubt. One of my first ever hearings was questioning Michael Cohen. And I remember the commentary at that time was, she's just going to put on a show. And I knew that I was capable of more than that. I think anyone who is used to being underestimated can relate to that experience. So now one of your big accomplishments is pressing Trump's longtime consigliere, Michael Cohen. Tough. Oh, God. It's really nauseating. It is really, really nauseating what this activist has become. I also want to get to her views on power, which I found to be quite delusional, if you ask me. She's presented with multiple headlines. The first is AOC is just a regular old Democrat now, and then another one that's more defensive. The AOC left has achieved plenty. Part of it, she answers, is because we haven't really had a political presence like this in the United States before. I think very often you have this consummate insider that was bankrolled by corporate money and advancing this, frankly, very neoliberal agenda. And those were the people that we're used to seeing in power. And so I think over time, there's been an inherent association between power, ascent, and quote unquote selling out. I often say to my grassroots companions that the left for a very long time was not used to having power in the United States. And so when we encounter power, we're so bewildered by it. That is her fundamental either naivete or just blatant disingenuous. The left is not used to having power because the left still does not have power. Or let me restate, the left is not willing to exert its power. We've all talked about this ad nauseum. AOC and the left flock has power in the Trump presidency and in the first years of the Biden presidency. There is a block with AOC and the other squad members, if you want to add Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, and others that are clearly not interested in agitating either. They could have exerted their power across the board. They could have said, we're not voting for the COVID relief package, which needed every single progressive vote because it was a reconciliation bill that required all 50 Democratic senators and Congress, plus the vote of Vice President Harris, without a $15 minimum wage in it. They could have done that. They could have blocked the infrastructure deal by not going along with the bipartisan infrastructure deal. To AOC's credit and some others, they did vote against the bipartisan infrastructure deal because they said, we're not going to vote for this if the Build Back Better wasn't attached to it. But on countless other things, they have continually handed their vote to toxic things like endless money for Ukraine. They have handed their vote for or refused to vote against more must-pass government funding that continued to give total giveaways to special interests, corporate subsidies. They have not held out or blocked legislation for healthcare during a pandemic, to reinsert a public option, to declare a climate emergency. They have continued to continually hand their vote to Biden and the Democrats. Why? In the name of proving herself to her corporate Democrat colleagues. This, honestly, is a much younger version of Elizabeth Warren, who, if you remember, once upon a time, had that viral, meeting in somebody's living room when she was running for Massachusetts senator. Corporations, their profits came from the taxpayers who paid for their roads, et cetera, et cetera. Even though, I'm a believer in MMT and taxpayers federally don't technically pay for these things. But anyway, Elizabeth Warren went viral for sticking it to the establishment, sticking it to the corporations. But then when she got into Congress and into the Senate, all of a sudden, she had the long view approach and, war will be done if I have a seat at the table rather than trying to flip over the table. This is what you're seeing in this current or newer version of AOC. Finally, do you feel more comfortable in the Democratic Party now? The way you described it initially was fraught. They rejected you and you were definitely trying to change the party. You said you've pushed the party leftward. Many would agree. So is it okay to be a regular Democrat now? The activist in me always seeks to agitate for more. I think despite there being progress, many people are still woefully underserved in this country. but the Democratic Party has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. Even if you just look at the numbers, I believe it's something around 50% of House Democrats have been elected since 2018. And so what is considered center and moderate now is dramatically different than when it was 5 years ago. The Democratic Party has dramatically changed in the last 5 years.
Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on. Not a joke. Not a joke. Not.
Democratic Party has moved further right in the last 5 years. Maybe public opinion has moved further left, in part because of Bernie and activism and organizing and how horrible this new Gilded Age we live in the United Corporations of America. But the Democratic Party has not moved further left. And if she truly believes that, she's delusional. I could go on, but the bottom line is AOC is not doing anything in reality to actually fight for Medicare for all. I don't see her speaking up for the United Auto Workers right now. I don't expect to see her on the picket lines. I would be happy to be wrong. I think Bernie would be on the picket lines. And I see no reason at all, if Biden is reelected, to expect anything more from AOC or this squad. I do not think change is coming through AOC, the squad, or any of these elected Democrats, or frankly, from the elected system. That doesn't mean don't vote, but it does mean in reality, we need to continue putting our efforts into outside organizing like you're seeing among UAW workers about to go on strike, the UPS workers, mutual aid, tenants unions, and all this union organizing and worker strikes. That is where the energy has to be right now.